Sarah. Baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Come on. No. No. No, no. Please. Please don't. Please. Fuck, man.
The number of confirmed deaths has passed 200. The governor has called a state of emergency.
There are hundreds and hundreds of bodies lining the streets.
Panic spread worldwide after a leaked report from the World Health Organization showed that the latest vaccination tests have failed.
With the bureaucrats out of power, we can finally take the necessary steps.
Los Angeles is now the latest city to be placed under martial law. All residents are required to report to their designated quarantine. Riots have continued for a third consecutive day, and winter rations are at an all-time low.
A group calling themselves the Fireflies have claimed responsibility for both attacks.
Their public charter calls for the return of all branches of government.
Demonstrations broke out following the execution of 6 more alleged Fireflies.
You can still rise with us. Remember, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. Believe in the Fireflies.
I was so excited to come down the stairs of my house on the morning of my 14th birthday, when I had only asked for one thing all year. I wanted a copy of The Last of Us in its best possible form, which was to own the PlayStation 4 and the remastered version. Knowing that the game was big, but never really understanding why at the time, I grew incredibly desperate with my pleads for this experience. For some reason, I knew already that I just had to play it. Almost a full 6 years later, The Last of Us from the time of my first playthrough until now is still one of my favorite games of all time. Why? The world, most of the gameplay, the characters, and the thing that ties everything in this experience together, the narrative. Let's start off with the world. The Last of Us primarily takes place in the year 2033, after a mutated form of cordyceps, which is a real thing that can affect insects, begins infecting people and causing chaos back in 2013. As you traverse each location, you're met with nature not only taking over where civilization once was, but the destruction of buildings and even cities over the years of the infection growing. Some cities are turned into quarantine strongholds to hold out civilization, but are obviously rigged with incredibly strict rules while also having a group called the Fireflies actively try to take them down. While the other areas are covered in nature's grip, leaving to forests starting to breach into towns and wildlife continuing to thrive where they hadn't been able to previously, like how several giraffes are found when the main characters arrive in Salt Lake City. Then you have the areas of great infection, like abandoned quarantine zones filled to the brim with sections consisting of fungus littering the walls while infected wander around aimlessly. All of this ties the idea of the world breaking and crumbling into itself due to the infection. You are far from any life that you know. Cold, desolate, harsh. This is war. This is survival. This is fighting to protect what's left. This is the world of The Last of Us. Before we get into an even more somber place, let's cover some gameplay and what I like and dislike. From the perspective of gameplay alone, The Last of Us is a third-person stealth survival game ranging in difficulty from just enjoy the narrative to get tickled and die. The footage you're seeing right now was recorded from my Twitch stream recently on hard mode to prepare for the release of The Last of Us Part 2 before I was sure I was going to do these videos. Thus why the chat is on the screen sometimes. Hard mode was actually quite fun. I had a lot of enjoyment going through it.
Are you kidding me? I pressed triangle! Really? What am I supposed to do?
Okay, stop. We'll get here in a bit. Let's just start with what I liked for now. My first two playthroughs were on the normal difficulty, and I thought it was decent to play with, but it never really tested the player at all. Hard mode certainly starts testing you, especially with added restrictions. I couldn't have increased listening mode distance, and I couldn't have the get out of jail free card shiv to get away from a clicker trying to grab me. If they grabbed me, I was dead. That's it. Ammo, crafting items, melee weapons, all of it becomes much scarcer, so scavenging goes from slightly important to very. Making sure that you go through every little spot in hopes that you don't miss that single shotgun shell that might save you from recharging infected while at low health later. It's pretty important. Obviously, you start taking more damage, so running and gunning every engagement is likely to get you killed, or at least force you to use up all of your healing items, making it harder to bring up your offense, with the option of Molotovs, which are sometimes vital to making it through an engagement where you have no ammo. Stealth is also made much more important for the same reasons. Being able to get through an encounter by taking foes down silently as to not alert the others in the area to your presence is a good way to avoid getting swarmed by zombies, avoiding a gunfight entirely, or at least staying alive for as long as possible. At the same time though, with stealth being so important, the higher difficulty also makes it feel like you get spotted a lot quicker by human NPCs, which makes those split decision moments happen where you need to either get over a fence to get behind cover or just go guns blazing into a fight. The types of enemies you face range from militia all the way down to brutally strong infected, and each has their own effective areas. The militia are skilled with high power rifles and have armor, scavengers are more sporadic but have lower power firearms and pyromaniacs. Runners are freshly infected with low awareness and are easy to take out silently but prove to be very scary in bulk. Clickers are blind but they hear very well and can instantly kill you if they get too close. And finally bloaters. They're massive fungus covered infected that take a ton of damage to put down while also charging at you and throwing exploding acidic spores with the power to insta-kill you with grabbing distance, much like clickers. Each situation and map layout calls for the player to take each situation differently. Stalk in a dark area where you can hear several clickers, stealth your way out without risking trying to take them down. Scavengers got you pinned? Take a hostage, shoot the rest. It's all player choice, and it is wonderfully done. The melee mechanics in this game are fine, and it feels really heavy and satisfying to do finishers with how different animations play depending on what melee weapon you have, or where you are in relation to your environment. The shooting feels very grounded and real, with light gun sway that constantly makes tense moments hard to fully aim and fire a successful shot. This isn't Call of Duty. You're going to lose your precious ammo by missing your target if you can't keep yourself calm and focused. But with all that being said, let's cover that rage clip and some lows of the gameplay now. On hard mode, this part of the game is ridiculously brutal to play through. You will run out of ammo incredibly fast on bullet sponges and shooting people several times in the head only to have them poke their head back out and shoot you with an assault rifle. Every aspect of hard mode was relatively good fun, but this section took me 40 minutes between just 2 encounters because I was getting shot around corners, because NPCs can apparently shoot the player through the view camera when you're aiming. You will get stun locked like crazy, spotted immediately, and running out of everything to fight back with. There was even this time where I had my crosshair fully inside of an NPC's head and the shot went to the left. Screw this part on higher difficulties, it sums up a bunch of issues with the combat. The Last of Us also has some light puzzle aspects, which are honestly probably the consistent lowest parts of the gameplay regardless of the difficulty. Puzzles really boil down to the same few things over and over again. Find the code to the safe, get items. Use shiv to open door, get items. Toss thing at bomb trap to make it explode, get to new area. Find ladder or plank, get to new area. Swim through dark water to find a pallet to get Ellie across, get to new area. That was basically ordered in least offensive to most. Finding safe codes are actually a fun mini hunt that really make the player think where a small sheet of paper could be hiding in an area, while the planks make me want to slam my head against a wall because honestly sleeping is more exciting than this. And they use it like 10 times. The last bit of gameplay that I can talk about wonderfully transitions into the final aspect of The Last of Us. The characters and the narrative. don't worry, no spoilers yet. Throughout the entire game, the cutscenes aren't really where you get the most from our characters. It's the dialogue they share in the middle of fights, when strolling through someplace,
It's strange seeing a checkpoint with no soldiers.
Well, this is what most zones look like. This place has been abandoned for a while now.
and when you're given the option to talk if you happen to stumble upon the right place at the right time.
Give us our rations. Why wouldn't they give them their food?
Sometimes they ran out. Most times they just held on to it.
That never happened in Boston.
Trust me, it happened all the time.
All of this adds so much charm to the game, and it fills in those moments of quiet scavenging with tons of character development and world building. Much like Celeste, it also adds in the option to find comedic relief through your efforts. Though, unlike that charming little indie game, in The Last of Us, it feels necessary. It doesn't have tricky but fun platforming that can be enjoyed regardless of what's going on. If The Last of Us only had the gameplay, it probably would have come and gone very quickly. But it's been remembered. And that is for a damn good reason. It sucks that when I first played The Last of Us, I was 14. I say this because the game just bleeds pure and raw emotion directly into you. And as an angsty teenager, a lot of shit just goes over your head. Not even 5 minutes into the game, and they make you care about a relationship between a father and his daughter. And by minute 20, it rips your heart out. Something that took several months for Telltale Games to do took Naughty Dog a matter of 20 minutes before the title card of the game even showed up. That is a masterful narrative. Sarah, Joel, Ellie, Tess, Marlene, Bill, Henry, Sam, Tommy, David. Without even thinking about it for more than a moment, I can tell you any important character's name, what they're like, what their motivations are, and when you meet them in the game. I've played this game 3 times in my entire life, 2 of which were half a decade ago and lastly over a month ago. That speaks to how well the people at Naughty Dog knew what they were doing and delivered a masterful game to amaze millions of players around the world. If a dummy like me can remember it so vividly, it's pretty frickin' good. The narrative follows Joel, the father from the beginning who has lost everything by the time we cut back to him 20 years after the infection begins. Ellie, a 14-year-old girl who holds immunity from the infection, needs Joel to escort her across the country to a group called the Fireflies so that a vaccine can be made. Along the way, you team up with some of the individuals mentioned before. Joel starts this journey with Tess, a no-bullshit brute with a soft spot for Joel. She agrees to take Ellie to the Fireflies with Joel, but gets bitten soon after. She talks Joel into taking Ellie all the way to his brother before dying trying to buy them some time. You later team up with Bill, a loner type that has clearly got some serious trust issues regardless of knowing Joel and owing him a favor. You work with him to get a truck working, and then he tells them to literally fuck off. Then you meet up with Henry and Sam a bit later. 2 brothers trying to make it through scavenger territory to meet up with Fireflies at an outpost. Through hostile territory, they ditch Joel and Ellie, coming back later to save them from drowning after they're forced to jump off of a bridge. They all work together to get through a sewer system after some seriously high tension, and go through a town talking about the old world and bonding with one another. Then they fight off an attack from the scavenger in an armored vehicle, and get to the radio tower. Then bam. Sam is infected, Henry kills himself. After a full season change, Joel and Ellie find themselves at Tommy's, Joel's brother who was at the very start of the game and apparently stuck with Joel for a long time after the opening scene and through the 20-year gap where they developed a history of killing and doing what needed to be done to stay alive. Now, over time of this entire journey, Joel and Ellie had finally started becoming close with one another. With how Joel lost his daughter, it makes sense that he was so hesitant with Tess pleading for them to keep going. The distance Joel tries to keep so that he doesn't get attached, only to wind up slowly doing so anyways. Which makes this section of the game so emotionally moving and tense. Joel tries to hand Ellie over to Tommy so that he can take her to the Fireflies, as he is an ex-member of their group. Tommy only agrees to do so after pressure from Joel and seeing how the two interacted together after a raid hit the generator dam. At this point though, Ellie catches wind that something is really off, so she runs away. This is where a hard-hitting conversation hits between Joel and Ellie. Ellie tells Joel she isn't Sarah, so he shouldn't abandon her just because he can't separate the two because of his history. The raw emotion and the skillful motion capture brought by the actors and the production crew is insanely powerful here. Ellie might have badass moments and be really cool, but she's still only a scared 14-year-old girl living in a shit world. Joel might be nice to her at times, but he's still hurting over the loss of his daughter and hardened by the years of constant strain. They both need one another, but Joel isn't going to accept that yet. These characters are made real by the people who portray them. There's a reason this scene sticks out to everybody who plays it. It cements these characters in our heads as actual people living in such pain and suffering. After they take out a small group of scavengers that burst into the home they were talking in, Joel, Tommy, and Ellie head back to Jackson, the town Tommy and his partner had been working on. However, the words that Ellie spoke apparently had taken effect on Joel, and he leaves with her out to University Eastern Colorado after Tommy informs them that's the location they'll find the Fireflies. As they reach the college campus where the Fireflies are supposed to be, only finding that they'd abandoned the lab and went to Salt Lake City instead. However, as they try to leave, they're attacked by scavengers and Joel is nearly fatally wounded. Badass Ellie takes a beating but gets them both out of there, winding up taking care of Joel through the winter. She's not about to let the last person who cares about her die. I should add in real quick, the section of time here is where the game's DLC takes place, Left Behind. However, I played so much of The Last of Us recently that I took a pass on it. But essentially, it covers Ellie's past while she tries to find medicine for Joel, cutting in between the two timelines as you play on. In it, she talks about her friend and all the time that they spent together, and also when they both got bit. It's a few more hours of excellent in The Last of Us narrative, and is a very welcome addition. In the winter, Ellie comes across a man named David while she's out hunting. He asks for a trade for her buck that she killed, and Ellie calls for medicine, which starts to click the gears in his head. After some difficult but fair defense sections, David reveals to Ellie that he's been after her and Joel for slaughtering their men. She makes it out of there just in time to give Joel the medicine and realizes she was being tracked, so she hightails it out of there to get them away from Joel, only to be captured a little bit later. At the same time that Ellie wakes up to find out that David is a pedophilic, cannibalistic asshole and breaks his fucking finger, Joel wakes up and realizes that Ellie is gone, and thus his baby is gone. And he'll do anything, regardless of his injury, to get her back. Seeing Ellie again, we're shown that she's managing to escape, eventually getting into a boss fight and winning oh so brutally, while Joel powers his way through several men to get to her and save her from that hell. This is where it happens. While Ellie is scared, crying, and freaking out over having to kill David, Joel finally has had enough of holding back. He isn't going to let Ellie be scared anymore. She is his baby girl. We cut back to them when they've made it to Salt Lake City in the spring. Ellie has clearly been distraught over the whole situation in winter, but overall the two are conversing and acting like they're comfortable with one another now that Joel has finally taken over as her tried and true protector and father figure. At the end of this section, Joel and Ellie manage to get pulled into rushing waters after a bus they're using to cross collapses. Joel finds Ellie and brings her out of the water, but realizes she isn't breathing, so he does the right thing by going straight to chest compressions, but the Fireflies come over and knock him out regardless. This is where Joel is told by Marlene, Queen Firefly, that her immunity is a mutation in her brain. There would need to be a surgery to remove it to reverse engineer a vaccine, and it would unfortunately kill her. Yeah, like Joel would let that happen at this point. After Joel goes Terminator mode and just makes his way to the surgical room, he's threatened by some random-ass doctor before being killed by Joel. He picks up Ellie, brings her out of there safely. Though they're stopped by Marlene, Joel isn't having any of her shit at this point and just kills her. Ellie wakes up eventually and asks what happens, as they're now in a car driving back to Tommy's town. Joel told her that there were several other immune people there, and that no cure was actually being made. He lied to protect his own selfish desire to keep her safe. Or maybe he told the lie in fear that it might not work, that her life would have been wasted. Or a cure could be made and they'd capitalize on it. Regardless of what was going on in his head, Joel made a massive decision that set forth their future paths. Ellie and Joel make it back to Tommy's. Just before they go down the hill, Ellie demands that Joel reassures her that every single thing Joel said about the Fireflies was true. He swears by it.
Okay.
And it cuts to black. No more answers or questions. You don't know if she believes him or not. Just credits. The Last of Us. This game, for everything that it achieves with its incredible narrative and its ability to evoke real emotions from its players, it's one of the most incredible experiences you could ever have with a video game, or hell, maybe from any medium at this point. I even started playing this game for my parents when we lost internet at the house so they could have something to watch, and they were entertained. As an adult now, this game only inflicts more tugs at my heartstrings now that I'm out of my emotional, angsty teen years and can enjoy things for more than just shoot gun, kill man! If you watched the intro to this video, you could hear through my voice that I was already crying over the opening, and if you were on my Twitch stream before I even started playing, I admitted that I had gotten emotional over just hearing the music alone on the main menu. It has stuck with and resonated with me for 6 years and counting. Even after playing the second game and having my heart broken and my brain kicked around, making this video was a very emotional experience for me. I love this game. And honestly, if it weren't for Crash Bandicoot 2 on PS1 being so nostalgically cemented in my head as the first game I ever played and one of my favorites, The Last of Us legitimately might be my favorite game of all time. No joke, it's that good. Naughty Dog grew up with me, from childhood to adulthood, and although I missed out on a few of their games, I can't say I've probably already played the ones that are going to stick with me the most. The Last of Us Remastered on PS4 is a perfect experience and nearly a perfect game. An easy 10 out of 10, hands down. If you haven't played it, do so. You won't regret it unless you are actively trying to hate it. Speaking of people actively trying to hate a game, it seems I have one more video to make. Thank you so much for watching.